welcome back. It's good to have you again. The last time we met, we were downstairs in the main hall, and I do believe that you have been here in the gallery before with my colleague, but nonetheless, this episode we will spend here in the gallery because there are a couple of things here that have a connection to the theater in the 20s, in the next decade. So why don't we get to work? And I'll point out several items here that has some kind of an influence on the Polish theater, and that is General Pershing. He is shown here as being in France with the Polish army. And one thing I did not mention last time is that hall downstairs was the second recruiting center to the Polish army. We have here a Polish actor who never came here to America, but we have his head here at least, and he is the gentleman Mieczysław Frękiel. We also have a head of an athlete, a woman, an Olympiad. Her name is Stanisława Walesiewiczówna, who later on became Stella Walsh. Interesting. Why? And here we have a painting which is titled Dzieci wrześni. It depicts these three children who back in the day of the partitions, especially under the Prussian partitions, were denied of any contact with Polish language, a Polish book, Polish culture, Polish traditions. That was being eliminated by the Prussian authorities. And you may say, well, what does it have to do with the theater? I have to remind you that after World War I, America suffered greatly during that period. And once the war was over, her attitudes towards immigration changed, almost something like what we have today. It said also, we are done with everything. We're going to mix everybody together, what is known as the melting pot theory, and we'll be one happy society with picket fences, dogs, and canaries in cages. On the Polish side, we also suffered during that period, and we said, okay, we've done our business. Poland is back on the map. Let her grow, and let's look after us. We are sick and tired of being blue-collar workers. And so this idea of immigration and our names kind of caused some problems for us. And that's why we started changing our names. Kożuchowska became Kozan, Szafrański became Schaefer, Wesołowski became Weiss, and so on and so on. Another thing is, after Poland gained its independence, many Poles went back. In fact, in the notations of the Polish consulate, they say that in 1923, they reduced the staff in the passport department because till 1923 people were going back. And why not? If you were a doctor or a lawyer from Poland here in Chicago without a language, just like today, you were washing dishes in a Chinese restaurant or something. Now you had an opportunity. This pressure, this politics of anti-immigrant, anti-Catholic, also had its influence on education, and mainly Catholic education, and that's where our kids went, to parochial schools. The language of instruction in those parochial schools was the Polish language. English was a subject. Now it reversed. And so adding to the changing of names, our kids not being able to learn their culture, we were in trouble. Let me go back to where I stopped last time you were on a visit. I mentioned that there were 14 Polish theaters. We know this, and we have a name of every theater. They don't sound very Polish. You have the Logan Square Theater, which is a movie house today. There was the Polonia Theater. We have the Chopin Theater right down the street from us, the Chicago Avenue, the Juno Theater, Big Ashland Theater, Ochyliński Theater. Obviously, there was a Polish gentleman who was the owner. Kożuchowska Theater, also Polish name. Premier Iola, a very popular, and was one of the first theaters, professional, because we're talking about professional theaters now, that you had quite a few actors that still were around at my time, and that is Pani Pucińska, Lydia Pucińska, Pani Eminowicz, Majewski, and so on. Then you have Biały Orzeł, Czarny Kot, sounds black cat, sounds a little bit burlesque. And then the Drake Theater in Avondale. By the 1920s, there's no sign that they ever existed. And we have no proof. Everything is from second sources. We do not have a program, we do not have a ticket, we don't have a poster, nothing. We know that the actors moved around, whether it was because better pay, or better conditions and things like this. We do know that they played, Iola, I believe, was a theater that had performances every day of the week. But weekends, we also know that there were up to 4 performances during a Sunday or a Saturday. Now, what kind of plays they were, we don't know. We do know that they had professional makeup people and costumes, because in some of the programs of the amateur theaters and the Society Polish Literary and Dramatic Circles of America, in their ad books there are costume shops for all occasions, including weddings, and makeup people. The group that took over and at one time worked laterally with the professional theater were the dramatic circles, the literary, musical, and dramatic circles. There was a whole bunch of them. Some of them started going back to 1902, for example, and it was a dramatic circle, not to be confused with, it's the dramatic circle of Holy Trinity, not to be confused with the parish theatrical group. And just look at the names. It will tell you what they had in mind and in heart. Dramatic and Literary Circle of the Free Poland. Dramatic and Literary Circle of Love of Homeland. Dramatic and Literary Circle of the Bell of Freedom. The White Eagle. May 3rd. Polish Eagles. Great Poland. And the Sons of Freedom. And then they were learned people who loved literature and so on, that they took names of our great master. Helena Modrzejewska, Henryk Sienkiewicz, Juliusz Słowacki, Kazimierz Pułaski, Żeromski, Wyspiański, Raymond Paderewski, even one for George Washington and one for Woodrow Wilson, the man who was very influential in Versailles, getting us back on the map of Poland. They obviously had in heart the culture, the language, the beautiful literary treasures that we have. One of the first literary and dramatic circles was Promień, the Flame. And I have a program from their 10th anniversary, and I have a program from their 15th year anniversary. And just let me read you a passage. There's an article here, and it talks about the obstacles to the development of literary circles. One of the saddest reasons in our Polish society in exile is having been transplanted into American soil, assimilated out of necessity, adopted to indigenous life, whose alpha and omega is the dollar above all other things. Thousands of our young people are drawn every year into the American whirlpool with loss to our Polishness because of the lack of encouragement on the part of leadership from Polish community. 5 years has passed. Let's see if anything has changed. In a country where young people see so little and want to see more than the dollar, where the well-known "help yourself" stands in the way of selfless friendship, and the magnet of Americanization constantly pulls the ranks of our young people from the path of nurturing Polish language, art, and literature. It is most difficult to organize and maintain something that would be an active society, breathe in Polish in the American atmosphere, and proclaim through work that it lives and wants to live. These young people, many of them, I presume, were already born here. They were young adults. They were, had jobs, maybe even had families, young adults, and yet how much at heart they had their Polishness. Because they knew that if our diaspora, wants to exist here, we have to have young blood. And they have to know something of who they are so that they will know what is it that they want for their own here in this free land. And so here we have programs of those literary and dramatic circles. In 1928, and this is where the theaters, professional theaters, are out of the picture, one of the circles, Kółko Amatorskie imieniem Osolińskich, suggested that all these different groups, Miłość Ojczyzny, Ognisko, Kółko Pułaskiego, Syny Wolności, would unite into one. And so, look at that, isn't that nice? I guess this served when they were walking in a May 3rd Constitution parade, and they did, by the way. I mean, each one of the members had a sash like this on them. I think that's kind of pretty. And thank goodness it survived so long in our museum. So, the dramatic circle of Osolińskich decided, and it is very unusual that so many other people jumped on the bandwagon, because you know where there are two poles, there are three opinions. So sometimes it is hard for us to get together. But they were quite successful, and they did everything by the book. They wrote their mission statement, they wrote their constitution. Once it was accepted, adapted by the different members of these different groups, they submitted it to the state of Illinois, and they became, I suppose, a nonprofit organization, but a legal standing organization here in the community and in the state. A little while later, the parochial schools got together too, because things really must have been bad in America. Mind you, when we're coming into closer to the 30s, things economically aren't all that good, because in 1929, we have the Depression. So people were more interested about their belly and the roof over their heads than the spirit, the heart, for food for the mind and so forth. One of the last groups to come into existence, and that is quite late because it comes in the 30s, in 1936, was the Young Forest, Młody. All its members were American-born. They put on plays not only in the Polish language, but also in the English language, not in Polish in translation, but in the English language. Młody Las, I'm just going to throw in one name, and that is Roman Puczyński. And the reason why it had such a short life, because in 1939, World War II breaks out, and all the fellas go join the army. And Roman Puczyński, in fact, joined the Air Force. His mother, whom I mentioned before, Lidia Puczyńska, was by that time a radio personality, and she did a wonderful job in keeping up morale, and just like in World War I, asked for funds to a point where Polonia was able to buy 2 bombers. And that is something I suppose to be proud. Roman Puczyński went on into a political career. He was our congressman. He was also the gentleman who in 1953 worked in England on the Cotton Massacre interviews and so forth. You know, another thing is when you had the movies, you had the radio. Well, why should I go, you know, and spend whatever, $2 on a theater ticket, where I can sit home on my own couch and listen to a radio drama just as good on the radio. And so Orzeł Biały, the dramatic circle, decided, hey, why don't we try a new way of spreading the good word? Because more people will listen to the radio than get on a bus and come to the theater. But maybe one fine day they'll be converted and maybe they'll want to see it live. And this program is just simply beautiful. You know, you have the whole orchestra there. You've got gentlemen and ladies, not in costumes, obviously, because nobody sees them, but playing radio dramas. Now, we do not know what was the repertoire for this, but I'm quite sure it was quite entertaining. For sure, the radio drama of Kłopoty Siekierków, it was a family setting of a parent, because I still remember it. It went on till the 70s, and this program is from 1936. And I remember listening to them in the 70s, where you had parents who were from Poland, spoke very good Polish, and there was Junior, who spoke Chicago Polish. Na kornerze, wynieś garbage, kara mi stanęła na strycie, or something like that. Yet, anyway, it was always with Junior had all sorts of problems, and mother and father would always straighten him out. And it, like I say, it was a wonderful, it was a 10-minute piece or something, and each day was a different episode. Sometimes it was continued the next day, but it was quite entertaining and quite, I would think, inventive, no? Of a theater group, and Pani Mróz, Pelagia Mróz and Bolesław Mróz, who were the hosts of this Grunwald radio program, you know, they did a double good deed. They entertained as well, spread the Polish word, and maybe, you know, invited someone to come and see live theater. Programs, whether it was on stage or in the radio, had sponsors. And some of them are listed as lawyers, pharmacies, real estate agents, automobile salesmen, bankers, bakeries, dentists, photographers, grocernie, I suppose that you understand, grocery stores. That's a typical example of this Chicago Polish, as we call it. And it's a very interesting sponsor here is Ralph Modieski, an engineer, civil engineer. And Ralph was the son of Helena Modrzejewska, a great Shakespearean actress, not only on the American stage, but she also was terrific on Polish stages. She performed Shakespeare in London, can you imagine? And they all sat, none of them left, and none of them booed her. That's how beautiful of an English accent and speech that she had. It turns out, especially with these amateur dramatic and literary circles, that people were very, very supportive. You have, if you look at them where they perform, every performance is in a different hall. Because as I mentioned, there was no physical Polish theater. And many of these people gave their banquet halls for rehearsals or even for performances. Many of them gave the furniture that was required for the set, dresses, suits, costumes, all these. So there was support in the community for this. Of course, it was business for some of them because their name appeared. The literary and dramatic circles, they even had their conventions. So there were topics that, as any other convention, whether it's a cardiologist or, I don't know, shoe salesman, there are certain things that they talk about, what should be improved in the business, how to reach more clients, so on and so forth. And the same thing with these folks. There are speeches that were here. There are, of course, congratulations. Some of what is said is very praiseworthy. But they still talk about the need for support from organizations, the big Polish organizations, that they should really consider what their priorities are.